Josh. My official title here is Nonprofit Success Coach. I help facilitate a lot of these kind of webinars and educational events with regard to Taproot and our programming. I'm also joined by my colleague, Megan, from the Taproot Foundation, who's here today. Megan, if you want to just introduce yourself really quick and say hi to everyone and kind of let them know about what you'll be doing during the presentation, that'd be great.
Hey everyone, so glad you could join us today. I will be helping cover the chat today, so please, if you have any questions at all for Josh or our guest speaker, drop them in the chat at any time and I will pass them along.
Thank you so much, Megan. Megan's going to be covering the chat in Q&A. Keep in mind your question might be answered throughout the duration of the presentation, but if not, go ahead and drop it in. We'll try to cover questions during the Q&A segment at the end. Like I was saying a bit earlier, if we are not able to get to your question, or if time runs out and you have to jump to a new meeting or something like that, we are going to include contact information. We are also going to send out a follow-up email with some more information, including the recording of this webinar. So you can respond to that or message us at our help desk to get in contact with us if you have any more questions once the event is over. But thank you all so much for attending and for this unfortunate last-minute change here. Like I said, it's a bit outside of our control. But our title for our event today is Virtual Volunteer Support for Your Nonprofit's Capacity Needs. So this presentation is really designed for new nonprofits who potentially are unfamiliar with Taproot and what we do and the type of services we provide. In particular, we're going to be delving into our online marketplace called Taproot Plus, which is a service that pretty much all nonprofits can use to source skilled volunteers, people from the business world, from the world of consulting, who have discrete skill sets that you could engage to help at your organization. So we're going to kind of talk about our approach and how we do that and how that works. We'll start off just by talking a little bit about Taproot and what we do. We'll also talk about why Taproot, giving you a little bit more information about why we exist, why we're filling the gap that we're filling, and kind of our approach, including the 5 principles of working with skilled volunteers, which we think are applicable across all pro bono projects. We'll also have some time to sit down with an actual member of our nonprofit community who's going to talk a little bit about their experience working with skilled volunteers and show you kind of what it actually looks like. So you're not just kind of hearing about it in theory. And then we'll talk about how you can actually start tapping into pro bono support from skilled volunteers, a little bit more information about Taproot Plus, along with some examples, specific examples of the types of projects and types of categories of skills and need that you can get done on a pro bono basis using Taproot Plus. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll have some time, hopefully, for some Q&A, and there'll be plenty of time to follow up with everyone as well. If we can't take your question live. So we can go ahead and just kind of get started into the main event, so to speak, and just talk a little bit about Taproot and why we were founded and what we do. So Taproot was founded as a nonprofit in 2001 with the knowledge that there's a massive resource gap present in the social sector. Organizations who might have the solutions to our world's most pressing social challenges simply do not have the financial means or staff capacity to carry out their missions to their fullest extent. Taproot attempts to democratize access to resources for nonprofits, regardless of their mission area, budget size, or years that they've been in operation. So that is really our bread and butter and the root of our mission. Giving you a little bit more of an overview of kind of our impact and what we do. We partnered with over 10,000 social change organizations and 24,000 volunteers, totaling over 300 million in donated professional services since we've been around. We attempt to forge hundreds of pro bono connections every week through Taproot Plus, our free-to-use volunteer nonprofit matchmaking platform, which we will delve into soon. And in addition, we have company-led programming through Taproot Plus, and our nonprofit has partnered with over 100 Fortune 500 companies through our advisory services practice, which brings talented corporate employee talent directly to nonprofits across our network. So through the Taproot Plus platform, we've attempted to lower all barriers to entry for nonprofits who are either just starting out or looking to grow even more. Um, and Taproot ourselves is a nonprofit organization. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. We also use pro bono support from skilled volunteers. So we think working with Taproot skilled volunteers is a really incredible way for emerging nonprofits to build infrastructure and also develop the skills of scoping out projects and managing external contractors. But more importantly, pro bono is a way to infuse your organization with really high quality resources in lieu of grant funding that organizations are oftentimes barred from or is really competitive. It's also a great way for established organizations to demonstrate flexibility, agility, and frugality to potential partners, demonstrating that you're going beyond fundraising to what we like to call resource raising. So that's our approach. That's why we like to do pro bono service. That's us in a nutshell. But I do want to talk a little bit more about why we came about and why we exist, simply because I think it'll help lay the groundwork for nonprofits so you all understand our approach, but also how you as a nonprofit leader should be thinking about skilled volunteerism, especially if you've never engaged with skilled volunteers ever before. So one of the primary reasons Taproot was founded was to help democratize access to consulting resources for nonprofits. Traditionally, these types of resources have been very gatekept or paywalled, barring thousands of nonprofits with smaller budgets from getting the support they need. Nonprofits are often founded also by very passionate people who might be jumping into the role of an institutional leader for the very first time. If you're not someone with a fancy MBA or experience in the consulting world, it's really easy to have trouble doing things like a root cause analysis, to figure out what your exact problem is and what the diagnosis of that problem is. And that's one of the other reasons why we came about. Additionally, people who are from the business world and have a lot of consulting experience are pro bono consultants or skilled volunteers, as we like to call them, who are passionate about giving back. We found we're unsure of where or how to do that. Believe it or not, there actually are not a lot of spaces where this kind of work happens. So we pride ourselves on leadership as an intermediary. And finally, we found that when nonprofits are able to kind of do that root cause analysis and correctly identify their needs, sometimes there's a struggle with turning those needs into actionable projects with a clearly defined deliverable and end goal. This can lead to what we call kind of the dreaded scope creep, where project goals just keep ballooning out and out to where a simple graphic design project can all of a sudden turn into a graphic overhaul of your entire marketing collateral and social media content or something like that with no clear end in sight. So helping to alleviate these difficulties remains at the cornerstone of what Taproot Foundation does. And I want you to keep them in mind while we're thinking about our own efforts or your own efforts rather, to engage skilled volunteers from the business world. All these challenges are still relevant, even for seasoned nonprofit professionals, we found in most cases. So now that we've gone over why Taproot exists, I want to cover our 5 core principles for working with skilled volunteers. And we believe these 5 principles are relevant for any pro bono project or engagement with skilled volunteers, whether you're getting them through a Taproot facilitated program or really anywhere else. So the first big thing to keep in mind is act like a paying client. So this is what we call our golden rule of skills-based volunteering. Approach skills-based volunteering and projects through Taproot like you would a paid partnership with any vendor or contractor. Both parties should commit to deadlines, give direct and honest feedback, and hold each other accountable for project goals. You, as the project leader or co-leader, must hold your kind of internal team accountable for setting up the volunteer for success. So take prep work seriously. Invest time internally before the project to gather necessary feedback, materials, and buy-in. Um, and before sourcing skilled volunteers for any project, make sure that you have the relevant staff and board actually bought into the project so you're really ready to hit the ground running. No one on your team should be surprised that you're bringing in a consultant to work with the organization. Some nonprofits believe that because it's a volunteer engagement, they should kind of just accept whatever their volunteer gives them. However, we found that if you push for high quality work, the volunteer can rise to the occasion. So remember, this project is going to affect your nonprofit's bottom line, your mission, whether it's paid or donated. So we advocate for both skilled volunteers and for nonprofits to treat the project like it was a for pay project. That is kind of, if you take any other best practice away, the golden rule of pro bono would be, I think, the biggest one. Principle number 2, know and identify your needs. This sounds really simple, but can actually be a lot more difficult than you think. So you don't want to rush this when you're thinking about what your needs are. You want to take the time to assess your challenges with your team, try to look for root causes rather than just symptoms, define the problem, and then develop a proposed solution. So ideally, your proposed project should center around a core skill set. Sometimes bigger initiatives require multiple skill sets, which might mean partnering with more than one skilled volunteer and multiple projects. For example, if your organization is creating your first annual report, you might tap one volunteer to handle the graphic design and formatting, and another volunteer to create the copy and key messages that are actually going to go into the annual report. It's easy to think about something like an annual report as one simple project because there's kind of one finished product at the end. But it probably is better to look at this as several discrete projects contributing to an overall goal. When initially designing your project, you want to work with your internal team to create an implementation plan for whatever end product your skilled volunteer delivers. So setting expectations on how staff members can use this product or deliverable will get people across your nonprofit also excited about the project. And then you'll also want to make sure to map these solutions back to your organization's strategic priorities. This will set you up to make a compelling and substantive pitch to a volunteer applicant. This is really the cornerstone of your project. So make sure that your premise here is strong. Make sure you can map whatever the deliverable you're creating is, from something as simple as designing an infographic to social media strategy, back to your organization's goals and your larger mission. Again, this will set you up for success for later when you're pitching a project. You'll want to think about any pre-work that needs to be done. So for example, if you're interested in working with a data analyst, do you have the relevant data scrubbed and ready to go? When mapping out these dependencies, you might realize that you have a different project altogether than the one you were initially thinking that you started with. So don't rush this part. You really want to invest some time in ideating and thinking about what your needs actually are and how you're going to describe them. Third, you want to get the right resource for the right job. So when you get set up on Taproot Plus, you'll have the opportunity to vet volunteer candidates before you want to select one of them to join you on your project. And we recommend vetting prospective skilled volunteers like you would anyone else applying to work at your organization. Ask for a resume or CV, references, and examples of prior work if applicable. You can have a volunteer sign a memorandum of understanding or some kind of volunteer agreement. Some projects might require a provider to sign a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement. This is particularly relevant for human resources kinds of projects or nonprofits that work in sensitive issue areas where information about their beneficiaries, it requires a higher level of security. And you want to make sure not only to have the requisite, that they'll have the requisite skill set, but that they are a good culture fit for your organization. So do they understand your organization's mission, vision, and programs? Are they open to co-managing this project with you? Are they open to giving and receiving direct and honest feedback? Will they be able to contribute successfully in a virtual environment? Most of these types of projects are done virtually, sometimes with people, on the other side of the country. Do they seem like they'd be a good partner to work with in that kind of environment? And you also want to remember a skilled volunteering project is not a giveaway, it's a partnership. So you're working on the project together. So take time to find the right person, since this is who you're going to be working with. When you use our online marketplace, Taproot Plus, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, you'll have the opportunity to link up with potential skilled volunteers first to make sure that they are actually a good fit for your project, whatever it may be. Number 4, you want to be realistic about deadlines. So even small tasks can actually take longer than expected when working with an external party. Your volunteer will need time to learn about your organization, share updates, and receive feedback. Active communication lines between your nonprofit and the volunteer are really the key to success. So skilled volunteering is rarely a good solution for really urgent needs. So volunteers oftentimes have their own full-time jobs, or are doing this kind of volunteer work after hours or on the weekends. And this can necessarily lengthen rounds of review, feedback, and communication. So one of the big trade-offs of free support like this, as much as we love it, is that these partnerships usually have longer timelines. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. That's true if you're sourcing pro bono resources via a Taproot program or really anywhere else. So if you have a critical need that has a hard deadline that's coming up or is kind of a make or break thing for your organization, consider cultivating multiple avenues of support outside of skilled volunteers. We'll never discourage you from posting this as a project need to our marketplace, but you'll want to take this deadline and urgency criteria into account as well, just to make sure you have the proper expectations. And then finally, our 5th principle, learning goes both ways. You and your volunteers rather, are experts in your own fields. And you'll want to embrace that. So your volunteer partner will need to learn a lot about your organization and cause area to make the project a success. So be prepared to get them up to speed. Background knowledge or issue area education that you take for granted might be brand new information to them. Sorry about that. You should also enter volunteer partnerships ready to learn as well. You may find that after input from a volunteer, the project's final product might change from what you had originally envisioned. Try not to be overly prescriptive when pitching your organization's need to a prospective volunteer. You want to leave room for their perspective to inform the final project scope, as there could be important details you might not know about or overlooked. Schedule regular check-ins and create a space to both give and receive feedback. Both the nonprofit beneficiary and skilled volunteer should aim to be students and teachers, as we like to say. So now, before we jump into how you can use our online service, Taproot Plus, I do want to take a few minutes and talk with a nonprofit leader who has used our online marketplace to source skilled volunteers themselves. And we've really found that it is invaluable to hear directly from other nonprofits about their experience. So we love having nonprofit guests on who have actually done pro bono work with skilled volunteers through Taproot Plus. And we have someone today, Chris Weichert, who is the executive director of Hope for Haitians, a US-based nonprofit committed to creating transformative and sustainable change in desperately poor communities in rural northern Haiti. And having spent over a decade in 3 separate fields of work, ministry, nonprofit development, and for-profit B2C e-commerce, Chris brings diverse skills and wealth of experience to his current role with Hope for Haitians. By applying skills developed in different professional endeavors, he pursues innovative approaches and productive partnerships to increase the impact Hope for Haitians makes in the lives of Haiti's poorest communities. So welcome, Chris. Thank you for being here today. And sharing your views and experience with us. So really, I've talked a little bit about your nonprofit and what you do, but I'd like to hear from you directly. Tell everyone, what is Hope for Haitians? What's your mission? What is your elevator pitch as an organization?
Well, I live in the Midwest in an area where the elevators are probably only 5 stories high, so I'm not sure I can really fit it into that short of a period. But Josh, thanks for inviting me on. Hope for Haitians is 22 years old, started by a local group of individuals who on a visit to Haiti kind of came back, changed, and said we ought to be doing something to help. And one of the unique things we try to do is we try to help by working with other people who are working there. So instead of us making a new wheel, we'll find someone who's an expert in water and we bring them into the community. We find someone who's an expert in construction and we'll bring them into the community. And so as a nonprofit, we really try to facilitate a lot of different resources for the communities we serve, which, as you mentioned in the intro, are in rural North Haiti. Sometimes we can't accomplish something because it rained and the roads are impassable. We're talking about communities where there's no electricity, there's no really potable water sources a lot of times. And so we're really dealing with very basic human needs. And we do that a lot through partnerships. And actually, the partnership we're having now in terms of with some of the skilled volunteers is really accelerating what we're able to do in some pretty, I think, dramatic ways.
Yeah, really cool to hear. Yeah, so now that you kind of shared some basic information about the organization, what prompted you to think about engaging with skilled volunteers, or what was kind of the genesis of how you got to Taproot, or basically what started you on this kind of pro bono journey?
Well, part of it's necessity, just basically necessity. One of the things that we're a small organization in terms of our staffing. There is 1.5 people working full time in the organization. We have 25 volunteer board members that are working board members, and we have another 50 volunteers in Haiti who are actually individuals who may have received services, but also volunteers. So we've had a long history of moving the mission forward with volunteers. But the gap that really got filled in a spectacular way when we found out about Taproot was the ability to bring in people who are subject matter experts to advance some of the real specific areas of need that we had.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned something that I think is probably really resonant for a lot of the nonprofits on this webinar today, which is kind of that scarcity aspect.
Yeah.
And like I said at the top of the presentation, Taproot Foundation is a nonprofit as well. We post projects on Taproot Plus. We also get pro bono work done ourselves. And I talk to nonprofits all the time that have 2 to 5 max actual employees, whether that's full-time or even just part-time people. So for people dealing with that scarcity issue, and if you have people who are wearing multiple hats at an organization, your executive director is also the head of HR, is also the head of marketing and things like that. This avenue of getting kind of skilled consulting support is kind of something that you can do to kind of relieve that pressure. And I think your experience really speaks to that in a very direct way. Getting into some of the specifics about the work you've done on a pro bono basis with skilled volunteers, do you have a particular project or projects that you did with a skilled volunteer that you want to highlight or talk about what was so impactful about it?
Sure. There's actually been one of the interesting things we did was the very first thing we did is realize that since we have no HR department and we're going to be bringing in a whole new group of workers in a way we hadn't before, my first volunteer position that I asked for was a HR person to help me sort out that question. How do we go about appropriately recruiting and assigning people to things? So we worked with someone in HR to help us learn how to do volunteer HR. And subsequent to that, we looked at the question of, okay, somebody's brand new. How do we quickly get them up to speed? Josh, you mentioned that earlier, how do you get them acquainted with your mission and give them the tools that they're going to need to execute? And so we actually did a volunteer project where somebody helped us develop what our kind of orientation and onboarding process would be for someone, so that we got them the things they needed right away. We dealt with questions, and it's been hugely helpful to have volunteers working with us who have subject matter expertise that exceeds my own. And that's been one of the challenges. I think there's a lot of people in nonprofit work who have, you wear 12 hats, and you're kind of good at most of them, maybe really excellent at one or two. But this was a way for me to say, great, this is a hat I'm okay with, but let me get somebody who's really an expert on it. And that has really built up our ability to make a difference. Another thing we're currently doing right now is we're working with actually two individuals helping us with our database. I think anyone with fundraising efforts or any of that recognizes the essential need of that. And ours wasn't serving us as well as it could. There were some issues in its early configuration, but we've had a couple volunteers working with us really intensely on getting it so that it serves our mission much more. So that instead of us working for the database, it's working for us and helping us further the mission. So in some regard, Josh, the possibilities are a little bit endless, and it's been very impressive the level of skill that we've been able to come into. And you mentioned that it does recruit from across the country. We work for somebody in New York City, somebody in San Francisco. We're here in the Midwest. We work with somebody in the South. So right now, I actually have volunteers in all of those locations. One's working on a donor survey project. One is working on Salesforce integration things. The other one's working on a data analytics project, trying to help us make sure that our measurable outcomes are achieving what we hope to do. So being able to bring highly skilled people to bear on your work is huge. When I ask our board for volunteers, they'll say, if, for example, I don't know if anyone else has had the experience where you're like, we need to be posting more regularly on social media, and so we need some help with that. And somebody will say, well, my kid spends a lot of time on Facebook, they could help you. And then what you end up with is inexperience or inability to connect. What we found is the professional level of these volunteers and what their understanding is vastly superior to the one we've got when my board members have suggested individuals for us. And it even surpasses the volunteers we've got in and received help from in terms of a college internship and such like that. Because every volunteer we've worked with so far has at least had a decade of experience in the field in which they're working and that they're volunteering. And so it's been, tremendously beneficial to be able to bring that to bear instead of someone who just said, well, I had a marketing class, so let me advise you on your marketing plan for your nonprofit. It's like, how about somebody who's run marketing campaigns advising me?
Yeah.
So the quality has been huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and you brought up something that's an important distinction. Is skill volunteerism is not necessarily the same thing as like an internship, or a jobs training program or something like that. And we emphasize to our volunteers, you should the skill sets that you're donating, you should feel incredibly confident in being able to evidence your background, and it because like we said earlier, we encourage nonprofits to ask you about your CV, your resume, even references or examples of prior work. You touched on something at the very beginning, which I think is really, really cool, which is the idea of volunteers helping volunteers. Because I think, a lot of nonprofits are familiar with what we call like traditional volunteerism, which is like direct service, people on the ground. All of us have probably done something like this at one point, whether it's, working at the soup kitchen or something like that, or the people delivering the direct service, versus skill volunteerism, which is kind of bringing in someone with this professional skill set to tackle kind of a broader kind of project-based need. And our philosophy here is that neither forms of those types of volunteerism should seek to like replace each other, because nonprofits need both of them. And not only do they need both of them, but they can help each other in really, really important ways, which I really like. So that's just like a great example of that, where you can use a human resources project to enhance volunteer efforts that you already have running. I'm in particular, I'm in particular a very big fan of human resources based needs, simply because they're not immediately the things that nonprofits think about when they think about doing pro bono, but they can sometimes be the most impactful types of projects because they're speaking to this your human resources, the people that run your organization. So I highly recommend thinking about human resources needs. And later in the presentation, I'll give a few examples of what human resources types of projects you can actually get done. I'm interested in hearing from your experience also, Chris, about, looking back, is there something you wish you knew before engaging with skilled volunteers? Things that worked well or things that maybe didn't? What's your sage advice from your experience, if for people who've never done this before? If there's one thing you could say, okay, do this but don't do this, or something like that. We're inquiring minds definitely want to know.
Well, I'm not sure how sage it'll be, but I certainly always have considered myself somebody who's willing to learn, and I've learned a lot in the process. And one of the first things I learned was how essential it was for me to have a clear picture in my mind of that deliverable, and exactly what it was I was going to be needing in the end and why. And the other thing was then when I talked to the individual who was going to be involved, I learned to be open to their input on enhancing that deliverable. I've gotten better results than I planned for because of asking for input from that volunteer. They've helped me refine some of my raw ideas into better ideas and then delivered well on that. Other thing that I learned was that it was essential for me to know why are they doing this, and how do we make this work for them as well. I always like win-win situations, and we've had volunteers who are like, I was recently laid off, needing to keep my skills fresh and keep engaged while I'm on the job search, and I want to continue to make a difference. I have people who've said, I retired out of 30 years of doing this full time, and now twice a week I work with a nonprofit on this type of thing because it was my life's work. I love it, but I want to give back. We've had people who are like, I just graduated and I am in that looking for a job and I need experience, but you can't get experience until you have a job. Well, we became a way that we could give them some experience that they could share in an interview to say, well, I worked on this project and accomplished this thing. So I learned that it's really important to know what is it will be a win for them. And then we try to design for that. The other thing we learned was communication. For our purposes, I have an inbox that gets about 200 emails a day. And so I didn't put any of my volunteers in my inbox. We opened a Slack channel, a separate Slack channel. So all my communications after we've interviewed and brought somebody on board happen over in Slack, which means when I'm ready to say, let me go work with a volunteer, it's sort of like open up the folder. What's my digital folder that has all my volunteer communications, all of my connections? And so that was something that we learned early on, is don't let it fall into all the other things you have, especially if you're working with more than one volunteer at a time, which we've been doing pretty regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, you touched on a lot of great stuff there, but the thing you ended with in particular, I think is something we really try and drive home with our nonprofits, but also skilled volunteers, is that really the key to executing successful projects. Taproot Plus is there for sourcing and getting you in touch with the right people, but at the end of the day, you're co-managing these projects together. You get to have autonomy over what you want to do with it. So there's a lot of freedom, but there's also, you got to take on kind of that initiative, that responsibility. And one of those things is making sure lines of communication get kept very warm, and making it a point to do that, especially if you are working with multiple volunteers. You'll see there's no upward limit to the amount of projects you can post on Taproot Plus, but your upward limit is probably going to be whatever you have the bandwidth to manage. And if you don't think you can keep in contact with 3 to 4 volunteers, then you'll want to consider that. But I loved that you went out of your way to keep lines of communication warm, because I'll tell you, the biggest reason why we've seen projects derail or not be successful is simply, it's not because the skill set is wrong, or like anything like that, or the person isn't actually up to snuff. It's mostly because communication breaks down. And so that that is just one of the keys to landing, especially in a pro bono engagement. Really, really, really important to make sure, as you have as a best practice.
And Josh, to build on that a little, the other thing I think I learned for myself is that I had to have discipline with devoting time to supervising them, to moving that project along. So one of the real commitments that has to be made, it's not just on the volunteer side. When we'll ask, how many hours are you going to be able to put into working? And that way we can scale, how long is this going to take? But I have to commit what's the time I'm going to give to do answering the questions, to moving it forward. Because I found myself occasionally being the reason the project had slowed was my failure to put the time into it. So I really would encourage anybody who's bringing them in to say, it's almost like you're bringing in a racehorse sometimes, and the problem is that you don't know how to ride on a horse, and so you're just always walking it, and it could run if you could make the time to give it the head it needs to get going. So I really would encourage people who do this to allocate specific time. I always end a session with a volunteer with, when's our next session and what's deliverable. So like I would do with my regular staff person, I'd say, okay, when are we next meeting and what's due then? So treating them like they're full-time or a regular paid staff is, I think, one of the best ways you can respect their time and get the deliverable you're looking for.
Yeah. And you touched on something that played into your earlier point about the ROI for the volunteer, the return on investment. What they're getting back. And oftentimes all the skill volunteer is asking for is a really good and responsive partner that they trust is going to be able to implement whatever it is they've created. That it's not gonna they're not gonna do something and it's just gonna collect dust, right, on a shelf somewhere. That you've thought through. And this is important for talking about making a pitch for pro bono, which we'll get into in another minute here. What is your implementation plan? Have you thought that through? If the volunteer asks you, okay, how are you going to implement this? How are you going to use it? Are you going to have an answer? That's something really important to think about, because it lends a lot of credibility to you as a partner. So when you link up with people, you are kind of vetting each other to see if they'd be a good, if either of them would be a good partner. So thank you so much, Chris, for your experience and just letting us know everything you've been able to accomplish with pro bono support. For everyone who's interested, we are going to send out Chris's LinkedIn information as well in the follow-up. So if you want to reach out to him and ask a little bit more about his organization or his experience, you can find out more about him and his experience as well. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. This has been wonderful hearing from you. And oftentimes you all, the nonprofits, can speak to things much better than I can. I'm really excited to be able to just talk about your great organization and everything you all are doing. So thank you so much for your time.
Sure, Josh.
It's been a pleasure.
I was glad to be asked, and very grateful for what the experience I've had with Taproot has done in terms of helping us achieve our mission in a more significant way. It's a sort of force multiplying effect to have skilled volunteers on real specific projects. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. We'll catch you on the flip side or see you online again. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad you all were able to kind of hear kind of what it actually looks like, working with skilled volunteers and a little bit about the experience. But now I want to get into how you would actually do this, to give you a little bit more information about that. So we have, like we've said, an online marketplace called Taproot Plus. It works very similar to other matchmaking marketplaces that you might be familiar with. But as it says here, this is our free of cost and unlimited accounts for your staff and board marketplace. So everyone in your organization could have a profile up on Taproot Plus. And this is where you can go as a nonprofit leader to link up with skilled volunteers to tackle full-on project engagements like what Chris was just talking about. You can even get some just small consulting done where you're just picking the brain of a subject matter expert. Taproot Plus is available to registered nonprofits who are 501c3s in the United States. Also, fiscally sponsored organizations as well are eligible to use Taproot Plus. We are also available in Canada, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and in India as well. So you can go to taprootplus.org here and create an account if you haven't already. And go ahead and start poking around and seeing how the marketplace works. But I do want to just quickly set some expectations about what you can find there. So there's two different types of engagements you can engage in on Taproot Plus. One we call projects, the other we call sessions. Projects are the things that Chris was just talking about mostly, which are projects that you and a skilled volunteer are engaging on, usually over a period of weeks. Most Taproot Plus projects take place between a 2 to 12 week timeline. That's just an average that we've found. We've definitely had projects that have gone over even under that. And are usually done between one nonprofit leader and a skilled volunteer. You'll also see that there's another option on Taproot Plus that you can request help with called sessions. Sessions are 1 hour, one-off consultative calls to have with a subject matter expert. These are really great for diagnosing, brainstorming, or even troubleshooting. Or like I said, if you just want to get some more information about a certain topic. So really quickly, I want to just talk about making a really good pitch for a project in a session to give you some best practices for that. Chris actually already teed this up very, very well and kind of what he was talking about in terms of thinking about setting the volunteer up for success. But you'll see when we ask you for some basic information about the project you want to get done, you'll see these 3 free answer prompts that'll show up on the project posting screen. And first, we're going to ask you just to describe the deliverable. What is the project you want the skilled volunteer to complete? What do you not have now that you want to have at the very end of the project? It's okay if this isn't a full scope of work, like Chris said. Hopefully the full scope of work is something that'll eventually be decided on by you and your nonprofit partner, but you want to kind of make the end state clear. Second, you want to connect this final deliverable that you're working towards back to your mission. So how does creating a new brochure help, end homelessness in Seattle, or whatever your nonprofit mission is? And then we're going to ask you about that preparation question. So what preparations have been made for the project and what your implementation for this project is. Again, that's going back to credibility, securing buy-in from the skilled volunteer. So we really recommend when you get to this part of the site, when you're making a pitch to go up on the Taproot Plus marketplace, to take some time with this and think critically about your responses, because these responses are going to be turned into your project post that we boost out on the marketplace to skilled volunteers to get them to apply to your project. And then when you go to post a new session, again, these are those 1 hour, one-off consultative calls. You're going to only post about 3 to 5 sentences or a short paragraph of the goal of the call. Keep in mind that 1 hour session can go by really, really quickly. So you really want to focus that session around a core question or challenge that you can unpack together. Keeping in mind that sometimes things that seem really simple aren't necessarily completely simple. So you'll want to stay focused, clarify the goal, of what you want to know by the end of the call, and try and be specific as possible. This is really a great opportunity to just drill down on kind of one issue. If you're wondering whether you should do a project or a session, again, if you have a deliverable in mind or finished product that you think is definitely going to take more than 1 hour or many hours, then you definitely want to go for the project route. If you just are looking for advice about a specific issue, you can go the sessions route. And I also want to link you all up with some examples of the different types of support you can actually get and the types of projects you can pursue while we end the presentation today. We actually facilitate skilled volunteering engagements in 4 kind of broad issue areas or categories. So really the first category we'll talk about here is marketing and communications. So if you have needs in marketing and communications, this is just a small smattering of the different types of projects you could potentially pursue with marketing and communications professionals. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just to give you an idea of what is possible. Again, we're also going to send out this presentation, so you don't necessarily have to vigorously, write these down. You'll have this as well. But things like creating a branding style guide for your organization if you don't already have one, developing key messages for a holiday giving campaign. No, those are coming up pretty soon. These are examples of the different types of marketing and communications projects you can pursue. We also facilitate projects in the business strategy and finance sector. So here's a various list of the different types of business strategy and finance projects that you could get done with a skilled volunteer. Everything from a full financial audit to just working out what your chart of accounts actually looks like on QuickBooks, for example. Things that are kind of technical. Or even developing a case for support if you're trying to fundraise is another business strategy and finance project that you could potentially get help with. We also facilitate projects in the information technology sector, and this runs the gamut from website UX and UI design to things like helping you set up Salesforce or whatever CRM you might be using to manage donors. Those are types of things you can do under the information technology skill set as well. If you also need help with, developing the website you have on Salesforce, or Squarespace or WordPress or something like that, you can get help from volunteers in our system with that skill set as well. So again, not an exhaustive list of all the things you could do under information technology, but this just gives you an idea. This is kind of one of the most popular skill sets or categories as well, because I know if you're like me, I lack the technical know-how to set up some of these things. And sometimes, believe it or not, Googling doesn't always work. And then finally, kind of what Chris was talking about with one of his projects, human resources and leadership development is the final kind of category of skill that you can get help in. So that also includes things like volunteer management, as Chris was talking about, but also things like board service or board recruitment. Sometimes people don't necessarily think about those as human resources needs, but they definitely are. I know we've got a lot of nonprofits who've wanted help getting an employee handbook together as their organization has expanded. So maybe your organization is bringing in a lot of new people, you're growing fast, and you need to really systematize your HR presence. This is where you would go to get help with those kinds of things as well. So again, those are kind of the 4 broad categories where you can get help from skilled volunteers for the different types of project needs you might have. And like I said, those are just to name a few. So you'll want to kind of think about what your list of projects maybe is. Also think about those 5 principles of good pro bono while you're thinking about those projects and kind of those values. Use them as best practices or guideposts while you're thinking about actually making the pitch for skilled volunteer support. If you do post a project or session up on Taproot Plus, we're actually going to take your pitch and really market it out to skilled volunteers on our platform, in our system. So we're going to boost it out directly on the marketplace itself for volunteers to look at. We boost projects out via email as well, to people with the right skill set. So if I'm a graphic designer, I'm going to get the occasional ping from Taproot Plus saying, "Hey, a new graphic design problem just or project just went up. Let's go ahead and see if you want to help this nonprofit." Same with sessions. We also boost projects out on LinkedIn's volunteer network as well. So we have a partnership with them that has helped us bring in a lot of skill volunteers. So our job on Taproot Plus is really getting your need out there to skilled volunteers in our network and trying to get you linked up with those people so that you can have that initial conversation to see if they would be a really good fit for the project. So if you get people that apply to your opportunity, we're going to send you an email straight away. And our recommendation is go ahead, strike while the iron is hot, and set up a time to talk with them, because that could be, your person that has the exact right skill set you need. So don't wait to kind of schedule those appointments. Taproot Plus will help you make that initial contact and schedule that initial meeting. And then if all goes well, if you find a really good candidate, you can match with them in the system. So those are just some basic kind of next steps to consider of what the process looks like. And like I said, I do want to leave a few minutes here at the end for Q&A. And you also will see here the email address to our help desk, which is at help@taprootplus.org. You can get in touch with us there. Again, we're also going to send out a follow-up email with a lot of informational goodies in it, and you can reply to that to get in touch with us as well. So I know we've gotten a few Q&A questions that has come in. And I want to kind of look at what's come in and make sure we answer as many of those questions as we can online. And just get those go ahead and answered for you. And like I said, if you need to follow up with us later, we can answer any questions that you have via email as well. So a really good question that's come in is, what is the typical percentage of projects posted on Taproot Plus that end up moving forward with a volunteer? So in general, this number is kind of always shifting because the marketplace has thousands of people in it at any given time. 85% is usually kind of around where that percentage hangs. And again, the caveat there is, that really depends on how responsive you're being with volunteer applicants. So keep those lines of communication warm. But we're going to do our best to get your project out there. I'm hoping sometime in the future, there's an iteration of Taproot Plus where we can kind of guarantee matches for everyone. We're not quite there yet. We like all other nonprofits, are at the mercy of market forces. But what I can guarantee is that we're going to make your project visible and try and boost out the opportunity as much as possible. Another good Q&A question we have: can you have multiple small projects that are linked together into a larger project? So the short answer is yes, most absolutely. And I like this question because it gets back to something to think about when you're gaming out potentially tackling big initiatives with pro bono support. So if you have a very big kind of goal, like let's say our organization doesn't even have a website right now. We want to design and build a whole website, and you're going to do it completely with pro bono resources. That is totally possible. But what you're going to do in that instance is maybe break down that bigger goal into smaller, more discrete projects. So instead of coming in and saying, we want someone to design and build a whole website for us from scratch, you're going to say, this first project is just going to be tackling a wireframe for our website. So we want to work with the UX or UI designer to build out a wireframe, and then we'll execute on that wireframe in a different project. So whoever asked this question was kind of right on the money and thinking about, having multiple, maybe smaller initiatives that are linked together to tackle a much bigger goal. You can definitely tackle those very big initiatives with pro bono. You might just want to tackle them in more discrete bite-sized projects, since most of these projects are one-on-one engagements. And then we have another good question of, what category would a strategic plan fall under? So I love questions about strategic planning because I'm a big believer in it. In most cases, strategic planning projects are probably going to fall under that business strategy and finance section. So you'll see when you go to post a project that will actually ask you, give us your best guess about what category of need you're looking to get help with. Um, don't sweat that categorization. Don't sweat that categorization too much, because we will review all the projects before they go up on the marketplace. So they're not automatically posted. We'll make sure, for the purposes of getting your project up in front of the people with the right skill set, that it's kind of categorized as the right thing. But for strategic planning projects, it's going to be under that business strategy and finance bucket, definitely, in most cases. And Megan's going to drop some information about a workshop that we actually have coming up very soon, on the 19th, I believe, about strategic planning specifically. So we're doing a lot more educational workshops as well. Apologies in advance, it's going to be me again. So you're going to get a lot of my voice. But we're going to share some really exciting information. If maybe you've never done a strategic plan before, definitely make sure to get more information about that workshop that we have coming up. So are there tips to suggest how to get volunteers to accept your project or on your project? I'm thinking, based on what we've heard, you'll definitely want to really invest some time in making that solid pitch. And again, thinking through what the final deliverable is going to be and what resources you can bring to bear. Consultants and skilled business professionals really like details. So the more specific you can get, paint a picture for them about the end state that you really want, I think the better. I think you're going to have more interested applicants. The more you can kind of focus, describe the end goal you're going for, and what resources are going to be available to them. And kind of putting your best foot forward as a good partner. Another good question was, can you explain a little bit more about how using, Taproot Plus requires time or energy on the nonprofits part? And I think, one of the reasons why we love pro bono is because it's done for free, free of cost, but it is an investment of time and resources. Again, you're going to be co-managing these partnerships together. So you'll want to encourage or we like to encourage nonprofits to keep your bandwidth in mind when making requests, so you don't get overwhelmed. So again, you want to make sure that maybe a project sounds simple, but maybe isn't. You want to give it enough breathing room. So for anyone who's wondering about their bandwidth, it might be good to try a project that's maybe a smaller, more discrete thing, like a graphic design project or something like that, where the final deliverable is pretty straightforward, to kind of see, how it feels to help co-manage a project. You also will get a suite of resources when you match with someone on a project. So we do have some project management resources, including a pro bono project guide that's basically like a crash course in co-managing a project with a skilled volunteer. So you're going to be co-managing the project together. That's necessarily going to take up some time and energy as well. So just keep that in mind. And I know we just got a good question in about if we have examples of successful projects on grant writing or fundraising. So yes, you could definitely tackle some of these needs using skilled volunteer support. With the grant writing area, I will say that is a very competitive skill set right now. A lot of nonprofits are requesting support with grant writing. And I say that not to discourage anyone from requesting that kind of support, but it is very competitive. It's easily the area which we have the largest asymmetry of nonprofits who really want grant writing assistance, and just the amount of grant writers who are doing that kind of work pro bono. So again, I encourage everyone to post those kinds of needs on our marketplace. but it is a bit of a competitive environment right now. So just keep that expectation in mind. Again, cultivate multiple avenues of support. And the other question with regards to fundraising is that I think fundraising is a very, very broad area of support. Pretty much any project can be a fundraising project, depending on how you're using the deliverable. So, you know, potential like marketing projects can turn into fundraising projects. If you're interested, we do actually have a catalog of pro bono projects that we've developed, and we've actually developed a catalog that is specific to fundraising projects. So it talks about everything from SEO, search engine optimization, to stakeholder research, finding out who you need to hit up for donations, for example. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go with fundraising. There's no kind of one size fits all solution to any nonprofit's fundraising challenges. There's no silver bullet that's going to solve all the fundraising challenges. So you want to kind of tackle your fundraising needs with kind of multiple initiatives. But if you're interested in that, you can definitely let us know, and we'll send you a copy of our catalog of fundraising projects as well, because that is a very, very popular area of need. So it looks like, I know we're a little over time, got a bit of a late start because of all the technical issues, but I think that clears most of the questions up. And I just want to thank everyone for bearing with us through the tech trouble. And, you know, still being here anyway. I think we still got a really good amount of participants. Again, we'll send out a follow-up email with this presentation along with a bunch of other goodies in it. Please feel free to forward this presentation to other people at your organization or in your network if they couldn't make it. And again, thank you all for being here, taking time out of your day. We hope to see a lot of you online, and we hope to see a lot of nonprofits who are going to be able to, you know, use skilled volunteerism going forward. So thank you so much for being here, and we will catch you on the flip side. Have a good one.